Welcome to the third National Links Trust webinar on municipal golf. The first one covered Winter Park 9, and the second was on Sharp Park and the general municipal golf scene in California, and some legal battles or some lobbying battles to try to protect municipal golf there. This third one, we're going to the very southern part of our country and talking about a really neat project, the Bayou District Foundation, as well as the Bayou Oaks golf course in City Park. It's a really an incredible story, and I'm happy to be able to share it with everyone today. I want to welcome in our panelists, Jerry Barousse, who's the chairman of the board of the Bayou District Foundation. The Bayou District Foundation is the lead community organization for a group of strategic partners redeveloping and revitalizing New Orleans Bayou District in Gentilly. The foundation has created a new mixed income community that provides residents with affordable housing, a cradle to college education pipeline, a primary care clinic with dedicated prenatal and dental care programs, and recreational support services like access to the first tee programs at Bayou Oaks at City Park golf courses. Next is Angie Belisle, School Director of EduCare New Orleans. EduCare New Orleans is the first step in the Cradle to College education program that serves the Columbia Parc neighborhood and provides high quality early learning opportunities for over 150 children aged 6 weeks to 5 years old. And lastly, Kara Lambright, who's CEO of City Park of New Orleans, City Park New Orleans. City Park is a 1,400-acre park home to the Bayou Oaks at City Park golf courses, as well as the New Orleans Botanical Garden, the New Orleans Museum of Art, and the Louisiana Children's Museum. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy day and joining us here.
Good morning.
Hi, good to be here.
So Jerry, I think I'd like to start with you. You know, as someone who's involved in a large scale golf project in DC that touches it's very much an urban project. We hear the term, oh, it's like Eastlake, or have you thought about the Eastlake model? You know, I think most people probably understand what that is to a certain extent, but can you explain what the Eastlake model is and how you guys got sort of along that path?
Sure. So all of this really kind of emanated from Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. The Bayou District neighborhood ultimately, which is a former St. Bernard public housing complex community, had 8 to 10 feet of water through a dense public housing community. City Park likewise had 8 to 10 feet of water at points in time. I and a couple of other business civic leaders were invited to Atlanta to see the Eastlake model by a friend, Charlie Yates, really with the idea that could this model be replicated? And that model is a combination of a holistic residential redevelopment community of mixed income housing together with cradle to college schools or a school system at the center of that community. And at Eastlake, obviously golf is a part of that model, generating revenues that help support the programming and the development of the community. We went post-Katrina in late 2005 and saw the Eastlake model and saw the impacts the Eastlake model had in putting together workforce housing, mixed income housing, great education access to healthcare, access to recreation, but always having that support system and sustainability of revenues generated by the Eastlake golf course and now obviously the Tour Championship. But those things really allowed for great outcomes and improved, really changing the cycle of poverty in that community, reducing crime, increasing education outcomes, increasing financial outcomes, and really created a far more healthy environment. And that was really something that as we left, we thought could be replicated. We didn't necessarily know how difficult that was going to be. We are, now 17 years later, but it gave us really that model to replicate, and then work to put in place in New Orleans, together with partners like City Park, like Educare, and many other stakeholders.
That's great. And here we are 17 years down the road. And can you talk a little bit about what's there on the ground, what you guys have actually been able to build, and some of the impacts that you guys have achieved?
Sure. So within this, the former St. Bernard Public Housing Complex was 18 city blocks, 53 acres, and at a point, 1,300 public housing units. At the time of Katrina, there were 900 public housing units there. What we have been able to put back is a residential community of 685 mixed income housing units. Over 70% of those units are low income families. Together with 3 schools, Educare is our early childhood, as you touched on, Kip Believe is our pre-K through 8 school, and then McDonough 35, which is 2 blocks away, is our high school, about 105-year-old high school that serves almost exclusively African-American children. So it's probably a little over 2,000 students within the community, as well as mixed income housing, health clinic, and other recreational amenities, community garden, and obviously in partnership with City Park, bringing golf back to the park.
Well, it's an incredible achievement, and I'm sure you guys feel like you're probably just really scratching the surface of all the stuff that you can accomplish, and starting to see the sort of long-term impacts that come when you provide security of work and security of housing and all of that, the societal benefits that you guys are providing. Why was it so important to have golf as part of the story? Doing a little research on purpose-built communities, I think you guys might be the only one after Eastlake, which was not a purpose-built community, but led to purpose-built communities being formed, that incorporates golf. What made golf such a important for you guys to incorporate?
Well, I think really what we always have looked at, one, I grew up, as did some of our others, in playing golf at City Park, and knew the import of golf at City Park, and bringing back golf to City Park was important. But I think more than anything, it was really looking at how do we create a long-term sustainability source of income that can help support the programs within the Bayou District, can help support the programs within City Park, and really, I think that's any of these holistic redevelopments across the country need to have that ongoing source of income for sustainability, rather than having to raise money, consequential money, to support operations on an annual basis. And that's really, we're beginning to get there. I know Kara is glad to get revenues from golf that are actually of consequence, and obviously that's the same for the Bayou District. There are ongoing programs and gaps that we need to fill, and the more we can do that through self-generated revenue, the better we're going to be long term. Can
you just walk us through a little bit about how the golf course renovation was funded, the process? I know that it was not an easy political battle. And so, I think that the overall price tag was $24 million. I believe some of that came from the city, some of it came through philanthropic giving. Can you walk us through a little bit of that and kind of how the process went?
Yeah, so we, shortly after we began our work, we engaged with City Park leadership just to talk about the potential of partnering. And we had engaged, the PGA Tour had basically offered their services for assistance on design. And so we worked with the park on what this could look like. When actually the original design had 45 holes of golf, and not, probably had 100 and had 54 holes of golf. And if we kind of worked through the process to collectively decide that 36 holes of golf was the appropriate initial step. And we ended up bringing the concept to the park, basically with that $24 million overall cost, but also offered that we would raise $9 million of that philanthropically and bring that to the partnership if we were selected to be the partner. There was an RFP process, which we were selected to partner. That actually happened in 2011. And we didn't get to a cooperative endeavor agreement until 2014. So, it was a process.
Yeah.
We were all working towards the same end, but, it was a process. And I think, one of the other things, and Kara can touch on this as well, is that, it was a state-driven project. So the dollars that were primarily invested were either capital outlay dollars or FEMA funds that resulted from Hurricane Katrina. So we had to go through, we were kind of on the sidelines for part of it, where the state went out to bid with the plans developed by Rees Jones and Ace Torrey, a local landscape architect, and the PGA Tour to solicit proposals for construction of the golf course. We had input, but we had not a whole lot of voice other than input. And so that was an interesting process, but ultimately we got there. Our contributions included building the new clubhouse, building new maintenance facilities, providing equipment, ultimately handling grow-in, which we didn't intend to do originally, but really working collectively to say, what do we need to put back in order to have a successful and aesthetically quality facility.
I'm gonna go down a little bit of a rabbit for the golf nerds out there. How did Rees Jones get involved, and did he contribute some of his fee or work pro bono, or what's the story there?
Not pro bono, but
yeah,
we actually engaged Rees. He had connections to David Toms. He'd done the Redstone golf course with David in Houston, and so he was actually brought to us by David. But originally, he was working to design 2 golf courses for the park, or with us for the park, and he had a pretty hefty fee that he was looking to get paid for each of those courses. The PGA Tour, as I noted, volunteered to donate their design team and really all of that cost into the project if we were interested. And we actually took the original Rees Jones design, which looked a little bit more like a Florida resort course than a course built through a historic park that's got 300-year-old oak trees. And as that was done, we basically developed a new plan, the tour, and we developed a new plan, which was predominantly what was adopted. And we said we'd be glad to have Rees Jones and his team, but for a significantly reduced fee if they were interested in staying on, in that capacity. And they, I think, felt that this was something they wanted to be involved in. And so we were able to negotiate probably maybe 20% of normal fee, maybe even a little less than that, for what they were compensated.
Good for you. And just stay on the sort of PGA Tour. They were instrumental, it sounds like, in this whole process. I know the Zurich Classic, the beneficiary, the 4Kids Foundation, also was really key. Can you just talk a little bit about their involvement? And obviously in the grand golf world, where there's sort of battle between the PGA Tour and an upstart league, I think what the PGA Tour does for communities all across the country kind of is getting lost a little bit, and I think it's going to be somewhat collateral damage, actually. But can you just talk about how instrumental they were in this whole process?
Sure. I think really from our standpoint, there were really three pieces of that support. 4Kids Foundation, which is the host organization for our tour event, provided the initial seed money of $250,000 for us to kind of vision this overall model of Columbia Parc and the park. and continue to be a supporter. They support Educare on an annual basis with a substantial contribution. Zurich, as the title sponsor, provided $1 million of support for our overall project. Much of it went towards our contributions to the park in that project. And then the PGA Tour provided all their design services and continue to be a resource for us. They actually consult with us on management of the golf operations as well. So, we've ultimately put in place about $300 million of investment in the Columbia Parc community and in the park, leveraging about $20 million of philanthropy. And of that philanthropy, 4Kids, Zurich, and the PGA Tour have provided over $3 million of that support. So, they've been a substantial partner and remained involved and interested in supporting the work that we've done.
That's great. Angie, I know your perception of the game of golf has changed over time through working with Educare and being part of this story. Can you tell us a little bit about what you thought of golf before and how it's changed?
Sure, absolutely. To be honest, before Educare, golf was boring. It wasn't an interest of mine. I had family members that played it, but it was never anything that I took interest in. Once becoming the director here at Educare New Orleans and seeing how Zurich and 4Kids invested, and not just the quality gap, but invested in the kids with their personal growth through the First Tee program, golf opened my eyes to how it's all about discipline. It's not just about learning the sport, but it's about discipline. So through the First Tee program that's provided through Zurich and 4Kids, our kiddos on site are able to learn golf, play golf, probably better than some people that I know. But while they're learning golf, they're learning about morals. They're learning about discipline. They're building their self-confidence. They're learning how to engage with one another in a camaraderie way, as opposed to arguing when they can't get their way or being upset when they don't make the hole. And so that program has really brought a different light to our program, not just for me, but for the staff as well. One of our favorite things is the Zurich tournament that comes yearly. And so our kids look forward to attending it. We march 136 preschoolers down how many miles to where the kids section is?
It's probably about a mile.
Yeah. And, they're stopping along the way. They're interacting with the guys that are down playing golf. They're looking for the three-legged alligator that sits on the side, and then all of the partners that Zurich brings in for the Kids Zone, STEM and the New Orleans Library and different things. Our kids are now able to participate in that as well, outside of watching the Zurich. But then also for us, it's not only our kids, it's our families as well. Zurich hosts every year a book fair for us. And so we get over 800 books donated to us that our families get to come in and pick. And so that builds reading and literacy at home, that parent-child interaction. And so golf has supported Educare tremendously in ways. When I'm speaking with former co-teachers, they're just blown away by the experiences that I'm sharing with them that comes to us from Zurich.
That's great. That's great. Is the First Tee stuff, is there a formal relationship between Educare and First Tee, or is it just something that's available? It is. Okay. So
it's available to individual schools, but we piloted it when it started, and we've been able to take advantage of it yearly. But they not only service young kids, I think it's through high school, Mr. Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah, through high school.
That's great. That's really, really, really wonderful stuff. Kara, I know your background. You've recently come over from Houston, if I've got that correct, right?
That's right. I took this position about 18 months ago, but before that, I was helping to overhaul Memorial Park, just right in the center of Houston, and of course, also has a historic municipal course that was recently redone by Mr. Doak. So
Yeah.
it was a really great experience.
So you've had a lot of experience and seen it in a different setting. How important a municipal golf course can be to the community. Could you maybe talk a little bit about Memorial Park and then what you've seen since coming over to City Park?
Yeah, and I would say, as a park operator, so I'm often kind of actually managing up to the front door of a golf course, versus actually like in the weeds on it. But what I do know, it is really such strong opinions that it's exclusive instead of inclusive. And as we continue to see public space serve maybe a different role than it used to serve, parks used to be access to culture and access to recreation. And now they're these center points of equity and access, right? Or this center point of sustainability. And it is up to urban parks, especially signature parks. So Memorial Park being a signature park, Central Park, Millennium Park, we are now setting the pace, right? And putting the pressure on other systems within a city. And it is really interesting when you propose an investment in a golf course, which has a much lower carrying capacity per acre, meaning less people can enjoy this space per acre than perhaps they could in another park setting. And to really set associated values with that, to say this is not out of context, right? We are not privatizing public space, but it is critical to work with partners like the Bayou District Foundation, or in Houston, it was while the entire park was managed by a conservancy, in the very middle of the park was this historic course that was actually managed by the City of Houston's Park and Rec Department, who has always been really guided in being mindful of fees, sliding scale, services, and making sure that folks can access this. So I think, when Jerry was kind of setting this up, like so many things that happened in New Orleans, there was these incredible entrepreneurial moments that happened after Katrina. And it was just such a complete lack of resources. It's such a critical time. To think that Jerry and a whole team went to a whole nother state and said, can we do this differently? But that intersected with a park. So City Park is 170 years old. It's interesting, even though it's named a City Park, it is actually a state agency. But it had 4 golf courses. And as this trend towards realizing that parks maybe need to serve people a little differently, this was all kind of colliding in the late 80s and in 90s. And there began to be like a lot of rumbling. Is this amount of golf course appropriate for a park? And so, we did have to have a lot of kind of tough dialogues with the community. That I think we can all look and say that they were really, really worth having. So one of our golf courses is now being turned into a 220-acre native Louisiana landscape. You'll still be able to kind of see that essence of that it used to be a golf course. Like in many ways, like it still has kind of a little nod to a different heritage. But when we came down to the community, said we're still keeping them, but we're doing it a little bit differently, right? That we were still able to weave through a story of access, equity, improving the lives of the underserved, being mindful of our fees, has made it a story that we can be really proud of.
Yeah. Well, it's golf can sometimes be a dirty word in certain circles, and I think it's as someone who really believes in the transformative power of the game, and obviously I fight that, and National Links Trust tries to fight that that perception, but it is out there. And I also, one of the other things I know about the Bayou District Foundation and the Columbia Park neighborhood, another dirty word would be gentrification. And I know, Jerry, you guys have had to sort of fight that battle. Can you talk a little bit about that discussion and what do you guys see there on the ground? And it's interesting to layer in golf into a project that already is going to be accused of gentrification, because you're sort of compounding some negatives maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was from the outset, much like the golf conversation, there was a question of, what is this impact going to be? The former public housing complex, the residents there had a lot of promises made in the years prior to Katrina, almost all of which were never materialized. So conditions were atrocious. There certainly were questions about gentrification. I wouldn't say there were questions early on about gentrification, but because there was kind of a total lack of knowledge as to what this was going to look like and whether it would actually materialize. I think the piece that has happened is those that questioned whether it would be done and whether the quality would be there certainly don't have those questions anymore. We do have, of the 900 families that were there at the time of Katrina, about 150 of those families are back living in Columbia Parc. And it has ultimately improved the housing stock in the neighborhood. After Katrina, there were over 400 blighted homes in the neighborhood that have subsequently been restored or replaced. Values have gone up, and it is a challenge across the city to bring additional affordable housing online. That's, to some degree, that's the replacement of public housing, but we're so far underserved from a standpoint of affordable housing. We're all looking for creative solutions to how we bring that. And so it's something we definitely gauge on an ongoing basis. I think our housing is, I would say, it's probably some of the best, if not the best, luxury apartments for residents of all income. So what our low-income residents have seen is not only that housing has been put back, but it's been put back at a level that they didn't expect, and as a result, they don't tend to leave. They may move up the income ladder, which we're trying to support, but until they move to home ownership, they're typically going to stick around for a while. And that was always part of the objective, is how do we impact the environment for these families by providing access to quality schools, to healthcare, creating a neighborhood, a true neighborhood, and that has happened. We've seen crime reduced by 99%, going from 43 murders and over 650 felonies in the 4 years prior to Katrina to basically, almost no crime. And that's obviously, created that environment that these families want to live in, and are, as a result, are achieving, far greater outcomes.
And Angie, you see the families and the kids on a day-to-day basis. Have you seen the neighborhood change since Educare? I mean, since I guess as the neighborhood has become more established, has it changed even that time? Obviously, it's very different than pre-Katrina.
I have, and it's funny you ask, because when I first started teaching in 1994, I taught at Rees J. Waters, which is where the now McDonald 35 High School that Mr. Jerry mentioned sits. And I left here in 2003. So I taught in this area from 1994 until 2003. We went to lockdown 2 times a week because of the crime at the elementary school. And so coming back full circle and seeing the positive of the neighborhood and the continuum of growth that's coming to the families that have returned, because I have students at Educare New Orleans where I taught their parents, or I taught their grandparent. I'm not that old, but yeah, I taught their grandparents. But they are extremely excited and just relieved to be in a community that cares, a community that's, it's almost like a one-stop shop for them. You know, there's affordable health care, there's affordable housing, schools that are high quality in the area. So, you know, Katrina was a curse on one hand, but for this 18-20 block radius, it was a blessing for what came out of it.
Yeah. Obviously, with Katrina and New Orleans being situated where it is, stormwater management is a massive issue. Jerry, I know as you guys were going through the process for the golf course, there was some backlash from conservationists, and you know, I believe the footprint of the golf course shrunk. Can you just talk a little bit about how the golf course and City Park in general is working to better the environment, to handle stormwater, and that's probably a better question for Kara, that part. But
yeah, I may let Kara start with that,
Yeah.
and then I can pick up, you know, kind of some of the early stages, you know, challenges that we had.
Yeah, well, I will. I mean, you know, going back to kind of the expectation of us being leaders in sustainability, and it's not just an expectation. I mean, it's really kind of deep in your bones now if you're a park operator, but especially when you're in a city that has to live with water. And that has worked very hard over the years to kind of put their head in the sand and avoid that fact, right? We know that City Park is very vulnerable. You know, we have the oldest collection of live oaks in the world, but we don't even have a tree inventory. We don't have a tree succession plan. If many of the trees are kind of hitting like a lifespan, which happens, you know, when certain stands are put in, with no plan for that. And then we also have this, one of the fascinating features about City Park, and you can really see it in the aerial shots of the golf course, are these beautiful bodies of water. We have one of the original bayous, which actually was part of the Mississippi River system, but the rest was actually built through the WPA. And I know that we have often seen a lot of big ambitious projects that 60 years later, you're like, what a disaster, like Chinese tallow and being introduced, you know. But this is not one, right? It is a beautiful, beautiful lagoon system where we're constantly fighting invasives, and we, you know, and we do get to hear a lot of criticism that some of that comes from agronomy standards at the golf course. But instead of that being kind of a throw the tomato, have it land on your face, instead we're able to talk about having kind of a really forthcoming and ambitious riparian edge planting with native plants to help you know, keep the runoff, and then really beginning to reestablish the these waterways that are on the north side throughout the golf course. You can actually, if you're looking at a Google Earth image, you can see two bodies of water that come together about this close where they left land in the middle. So we've completely lost circulation, and have a really clogged system. And I know there's probably not a single meeting that Jerry and I have where we don't talk about the water issue, right? And all the days of play that are lost due to it. So we are working kind of two tracks at once. One's with the city of New Orleans to really expand the carrying capacity of the park, the stormwater capacity, which would include deepening the bayous within the golf course, but hopefully that will really make a significant difference, right, in how the golf course functions. But we'll also be taking in water from adjacent neighborhoods that are really having a lot of business interruption due to flooding. And I think that's an essential story of a park these days, right? That it performs this kind of critical nature-based solution for the problems around it. And you know, the upside with these courses, I mean, especially the south side, the tournament course, is already beautiful from any camera shot, right? But that we're all committed to kind of doubling down on this Louisiana landscape and getting a few more signature trees in the appropriate spots and kind of softening some of the edges. You're going to, every single time you see it on TV, you're going to know exactly where it is. If the alligators don't give that away.
Right. Was the decision to return the other golf course you referenced earlier back to the Louisiana landscape? I forget exactly the term you used. Was that partially due to stormwater management?
That's a great question. We've kind of seen this in lots of golf courses throughout the United States, where for any reason they go fallow. I mean, even for such a short period of time. We actually have one in one of our local parks that during COVID, they couldn't take care of it. And suddenly it flipped to very different usage, which is getting a little hard to pull back. But after Katrina, there just wasn't any money. So one of the golf courses just truly went fallow. And here we find ourselves 17 years later. And it has turned in, maybe not the greatest version of a native landscape right now, because it's filled with a lot of invasive. It's more of a story of benign neglect.
Yeah.
Versus something intentional. But we are going to actually go in and create safe pathways, appropriate lighting, habitat, and really do an acre by acre restoration to bring it back to the Louisiana landscape. So you can have these two things right by one another. And also, I mean, remember the Bayou District Foundation is adjacent to the park. So for folks that can't afford to access the great outdoors, which is actually increasingly barrier driven. You can't get a bus there, right? You want to go camping, or you want to even go fishing, right? You can actually do all of these things in City Park. And I mean, a lot of that is a testimony, right, to the Bayou District's deep investment in keeping families nearby, keeping them providing them that kind of rooting that they need. And so suddenly you can have a transformative sport that they can access. They can access urban fishing. They can kind of access an urban wilderness. And I think that we're really beginning to do a good job of checking all the boxes that a large urban park can for the community.
It's great. It's great. You referenced earlier the golf courses, forget the term you use, highest use, or not that many people from the community get to have the ability to use a large portion of land.
Yeah, I was talking about the carrying capacity. It's a really
Carrying capacity.
nerdy park term.
Yeah, no, it's a great term, but it's also the flip side of that coin, right? And we're talking about sustainability, but talking about sustainability in the financial sense, right? If a golf course can actually be a contributor rather than a sink of funds, then the whole thing flips, right?
That's exactly right. When you can say, we're going to have a lighter usage, right, on this amount of acres, but what it's going to do is give us money to invest in other areas that are used differently by different people. I think that is in exchange, kind of an acceptable exchange, no matter where your criticism is coming from. If I'm able to get a reasonable pot of money without putting up too many barriers to entrance, but I'm able to invest it directly back into our services. I think first, that's the reality of park operations, but I think in this regard, we're staying very consistent to urban park values. Everything that happens at the golf course comes back somehow to the underserved and to access and equity. Every single line about it somehow comes back to that.
It's great. It's great. And along those lines, Jerry, some of the research, there's some numbers thrown out there about what the golf course is contributing to the Bayou District Foundation. How much of that revenue is staying with the park? Can you both maybe talk a little bit about the economic arrangement and how it might act as a model to other communities across the country?
Sure. Basically when we work with the park on the front end to to come to our cooperative endeavor agreement. Our commitment was to bring philanthropic equity capital to the project in return for long-term partnership with the park, which basically provides for, it's a 35-year cooperative endeavor agreement. And as a part of that, we are responsible for ongoing management, and then net revenues are shared with the park actually getting the lion's share of those revenues. But those revenues then are able to be repurposed into programming and operational support at the park and programmatic support within the Bayou District. So our net revenues, which we finally started realizing in the last couple of years, we had a couple of bad rain years to start, have gone to support our programming, including supporting EduCare, supporting our school and after-school programs, and really, just kind of targeting those greatest areas of need programmatically. So, that's our long-term objective, is to create sustainable revenue sources that basically make it so that we're able to support our programs and foundation operations, which are very lean, through sustainable revenue sources versus having to, be out trying to generate consequential net revenues from grants and other sources.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, I think we're getting towards the end here. Might open this up for questions in a couple minutes, but I'd love for everyone to talk a little bit about the future of City Park, and also the future of the Bayou District Foundation and what's going on in the Columbia Parc neighborhood. I might start with you, Angie, and if you could just talk a little bit about what you hope to see in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, so we utilize the park a lot, not just in the essence of golf, but we do go to the New Orleans Museum of Arts, and we participate in a NOMA program. And so we would hope to continue in that. And that's an art integration program. And it not only serves our students, but our families as well. We visit the park for the New Orleans culture, beignets. We go for family days, and the parents may play tennis out there. So we go to the park for a variety of things. I would like to do a lot more outside STEM learning at the park, and being able to, take a bus and ride 5 minutes, because we're literally 5 minutes, if that, from City Park, to do a lot more outdoor learning and exploration. So that's my hopes for the future of EduCare and the park.
That's great. Kara?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I'm actually going to tag a little bit off of your previous question to Jerry about the economic benefit, because one of the things that the Bayou District brought to City Park at a critical time was 501c3 status. As a state agency, we could not tap into philanthropy, and that has really been a hurdle. So actually, exactly 1 week ago, we've been working very hard for the last 18 months to transition the operations of the park to a 501c3 nonprofit. So City Park Conservancy was born, and all of the employees, every element moves over to that nonprofit, and we hopefully is really going to change our financial outcome here. But it was a critical step before we embarked on a new master plan for the park. So really assessing all the acreage in its totality. It hasn't been done since right before Katrina. And we certainly know a lot more. Our community has changed, right? And even, making sure that we're building a park for seniors, right? Seniors are outpacing children being born, and we're not building to that currently. So that's what's right in front of us as City Park, and Angie will have a seat at the table when we are really talking about what are the multi-layered ways that we can serve the community. So we hope you all of you stay tuned and even participate.
Is that I assume that that would make the state would continue providing the bulk of the funds, but it would allow
Yeah.
you
That's a
to go out and raise money on top of that? Is
So
that,
that's a great question, Will. So what has been interesting about City Park, even though we're a state agency, none of our employees have ever been able to participate in the state pension program, and we receive no general fund support. So it's almost like a heritage relationship, right, versus a support relationship. Instead, our revenue is largely self-generated. Which of course here you see, one of our more creative ways to pursue that. So in many ways, this just allows for a more creative process moving forward. So this, while there still will be the state commission that oversees the conservancy to ensure operations.
got it.
Mhm.
Jerry?
I think, as we think about golf and moving forward, we're going to continue to work to grow the game through access to golf for our community. Whether it's working with First Tee or it's other programming in really exposing our residents and resident families and neighborhood families to golf and to the park. The park, park is 3 blocks away from Columbia Parc. And in the former days of the St. Bernard housing complex, those residents vastly didn't know that the park was there. It was not a resource that was accessed by those families. So I think, the connectivity to the park that we continue to work to enhance, as well as growing the game of golf and really creating a long-term model to ensure utilization. We've seen, as I think everybody that's probably listening in or participating has seen, a growth in rounds of golf and, quite honestly, participation in golf. And I think that has been, been something that we've all been happy for. It's allowed us to increase revenues and income. But part of that is, how do we take advantage of that? How do we ensure that we're able to retain the majority of those gains and continue to expand access to golf to all residents, much as Kara's touched on. You don't want it to be a gentrified view. You want it to be something that is recognized as an opportunity and something that people want to take advantage of. And really at the park, we still have a North Course operation that is low revenue or low fee and provides great access. But we have our challenges because it's a flat golf course. It doesn't have quite the drainage we have on the South Course. So when it rains, like it did last night, there's a lot of puddling out there, and it's a challenge. But that goes to water plan. That goes to a lot of things, and we see those as continued opportunities to improve and enhance offerings, as well as contribution to the park, and ultimately revenues that can be purposed for good for our residents and school families.
That's right. Well, we forgot to turn on the chat function for the attendees, so we don't have any questions, but that have come in. But I might ask anyone who is out there to raise their hand, and I think we might be able to call on you if you've got a question for our panelists. Give it a second. I apologize. This is our third one, so we're still getting the hang of the technology. You'd think after all these couple years of Zoom, we'd have it down, but all right. Well, I think we. Oh, hold on. Is there a hand raised? Yes. Let me see if I can do this. Andrew, do you know how to do it?
I can't see who's asking. Oh, Mr. Kaiser, Mr. Kaiser.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, Angie, I had a question for you. I'm in the process myself of saving a golf course here in Louisville, Kentucky, Cherokee. It's been 127 years, and we have a lot of different outreach programs. And I just really was wanting to know more about the benefits, not only socially but educationally, networking benefits, the things that you think that you've seen golf has provided for your community. You touched on that earlier in this discussion, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, that would be awesome.
Sure. And, I spoke a lot to the benefits of what's received in-house inside of the center, and I didn't really speak to our parent engagement piece. We also offer programs that's provided through Zurich and For Kids for our families to participate in. We have a monthly chef to come out and cook for our families. That's funded through Zurich and For Kids. And what this is the parents are able to learn how to cook on a budget, as opposed to stopping at the corner store and picking up a hot plate that's worth $8 per plate. The chef comes in once a month and they're cooking a meal on a budget of $30 or $40, and it's lasting them 2 days. And so we have programs like that that's funded by For Kids in Zurich. I mentioned that we may take a field trip to the Zurich tournament, but our parents are also provided weekend passes, and before this is something that our families were never able to do. Zurich also funds a lot of our field trips that we attend. So, it's not just the First Tee program where the kids are learning how to play golf and they're learning the terms, but it's also how they're heavily involved in our day-to-day operations, and not just for the kids, but for the families as well, for our 2-generational approach.
Eric, you can.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm actually with the First Tee here in Pittsburgh, PA, and we run a golf course for the city. And so it's a historic course to say the least, but it's short. There's roads that run through it. So our biggest probably question to start is going back to the beginning of the process and getting the city, the community, the parks, and everybody on board to at least explore the opportunity. What was that like, and what are some of the suggestions or good, better hows that you would have if you had to do it again?
I think, part of the challenge is you've got to find, that community quarterback that's willing to have patience and vision and look at how they bring, the right share of stakeholders into the game. Understanding who that is, the city, the park, the school districts, the housing authorities. But I think, the front end is really, developing the vision and then developing, understanding who the stakeholders are and getting buy-in from all of those. It's in our case, it was a long process. It's been a long process, and it's still evolving. But you've got to be able to have buy-in rather than, having to battle with your prospective stakeholders. And that requires everybody having a voice. That's not just telling everybody how to do it and what needs to be done, but being able to say, this is the end goal that we have. What do you think of it? And is it the right end goal? And then how do we map it out to get to that end goal? And, I can tell you, it takes a lot of creative finance. It's going to take philanthropy. It's going to take, some government support. It's going to take, the use of different tax credit vehicles and the like, if you're going beyond golf, and state and federal grant dollars that you can access. But I think you've got to have somebody that starts, and it may be you, by saying, this is something that we want to make happen. And I recognize it's not going to happen overnight. We thought this was going to be a 5 or 6 year window to be able to put all the pieces in place. And, we're 17 years later and we've got all the pieces but a grocery store that are in place. So we're hopeful that, before 20 years, it's going to all be in place. But it's a process. And I think, I'm glad to talk offline, but it's, you've got to have the commitment from leadership and patient leadership.
We've got two more questions. We're going to start with Tracy.
Hi, my name is Tracy Raoul. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. And I am the chairwoman of the Jackson Park Golf Association in Chicago. And if you're familiar with the proposal, we're trying to get our 123-year-old Jackson Park Golf Course renovated, redesigned by the GOAT design team. But we're at a stalemate because of the price tag that has been placed on it by the designers. So the stalemate has really caused a rift in this proceeding. So I'm hopeful to find resources that can direct me to other muni courses and their price tags. And I've found some. I was astounded to hear this was 24 million. So I'm really asking for the best resources to help us overcome this stalemate so we can provide the same types of programs for our children, for our seniors, for the golf community, and just truly recreate a world-renowned course in Chicago.
I'll speak to that just a little bit. First, Tracy, my son lives in Chicago and he always pings me on the chatter on, on that project. So knowing that, I too have had to navigate, not quite so much at City Park, but previously, how do we find all these dollars, right? And how, especially in this kind of interesting world we're living in right now, how do we kind of justify investment into things like that versus other investments? At Memorial, we just didn't have the same type of philanthropy coming at it, and we really became increasingly concerned. We were creating something that we weren't going to be able to afford to maintain without whether build or maintain without really going to the residents themselves. And I hear what you're saying loud and clear. I really had to go through public records across the United States to try to understand what was happening in other places. And it would be a really interesting service, National Links Trust, perhaps, of creating like a repository for some of these things, so that we're not all having to be so scrappy.
You still have that data?
I do actually, yeah, and I do, and I would really, I would be, certainly more than happy to have some offline conversations, and I'm pretty easy to find at C. Lambright at NOCP. You can find me online. But even ultimately, from operations moving into looking at resident and non-resident, looking at dynamic pricing, making sure that we had, whether it was twilight hours or something, that we were ensuring accessibility. But once we had those values that we were talking about, we were always grounded in equity, access, and sustainability. We had a whole different dialogue with the philanthropic community, because we were no longer just a golf course, right? We were changing lives, and it was really critical to change how we spoke about our project and ground it in those. I think I've probably given a kind of a globulous answer, but first, you're not crazy. This is a real problem that a lot of other folks have experienced, and I would be more than happy to share anything that I know.
Great. Grant, final question.
Hey, Will, it's Grant Whitney. Actually, I'm calling from Sunset Beach, North Carolina. I did enjoy very much teeing it up with you in Charleston a few months back. And I'm delighted to say that I'll be attending the second symposium this year in DC and bringing my son.
Great.
and I'm very excited for him and me to be part of this again. I guess my question would be directed to either Kara or Jerry. Is it Jerry or Gary?
Jerry.
Yeah. Is there any way to get a copy of the 35-year cooperative development agreement? I think if we knew what was in it, I am a real estate attorney, and so I like agreements, but it certainly sounds like a wonderful, I guess, public-private partnership, right? And it certainly would be something that would be great if we could follow the wonderful lead in New Orleans and doing this in other locations. I think of, I'm at the beach now working remotely, but our municipal, if you want to call them that, our county courses in Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte, are really not very good. I mean, they're designed fine, but one's built on a landfill, and that tells you the value of the property, at least initially. But if this template could be followed, it sounds just wonderful. What y'all are doing down there, it would be great to benefit, the underserved communities, as well as all of those kids that want to play golf and for whatever reason aren't able to. So
we're happy to share it for sure. I think, Will, you might, or is it possible just for us to provide it to the National Links Trust and you could?
Yeah, that'd be great. We would love to share it, put it on our website and make it available for anyone who's interested. And Grant, incredible last question, because you teed up two different things. The first being, just a hearty thanks to our panelists. Just a wonderful discussion. And then the second being the next sort of time that we're going to gather, which would be our symposium, which is October 24th through 26th, where we're going to have people who care about affordable and accessible golf, municipal golf, getting together in DC. We have a bunch of great panelists, great discussions teed up. Damon Hack from Golf Channel will be emceeing. We've got Tom Doak, and then the keynote speakers, Mike Wan from the USGA. So I hope everyone who's here can participate and get to DC. And again, thank you all for coming. Thank you all to the panelists, and look forward to continuing to work hard for affordable and accessible golf. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.